Hi David, Rosengarten. Thanks for coming to Marlborou today. I'm Marcus Pickens from Wine Marlborou. So we're here, just done a regional selection and thought we'd ask you a few questions on your thoughts.
So you get me after I've tasted 30 wines.
Yeah, so it's a good way to be. Hopefully you say great things about us.
That's why I'm sitting here on the grass. But I will say great things. I love Marlborough. I'm David Rosengarten. I'm a wine writer from New York City and very delighted to be here in New Zealand and Marlborough.
We're very delighted to have you, and thanks for spending some time with us. So, yeah, generally I guess what we're looking for you is just some impressions and what you think about Marlborough wines and how you've seen you can either go through by variety, you can give us some few tips on wine and food pairings that you might think are suitable for our wine styles, or just lead off and tell us.
Well, you know, I've actually been a fan of Marlborough wines for a long time. I would say that I think the English discovered Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc a little bit before the Yanks did, but it was probably mid to late 80s when I became aware, whoa, something's happening here. So I've been writing about him and loving Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc for a long time. I would say that the other thing that is of some note historically is later on we started to become aware in the US that there's something serious going on with Pinot Noir in New Zealand. And the first thing we heard about was Marlborou. There was a push early 90s, didn't really take off. Then there was a push within the last 10 years for Central Otago, which has taken off to some extent. But to tell you the truth, I'm the guy who's always going, what about Marlborough? I mean, it's not that every region has to have just one variety. I mean, Burgundy has Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. I've been a big fan of Marlborough Pinots since I became aware of them about 10 years ago. So I come here with that background, hoping to learn more about Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, hoping to deepen my love of Marlborough Pinot and learn more about it, and then find whatever other varieties I can find. So today, Sauvignon Blanc was very interesting. We did a tasting that broke into a couple of sub-regional groups, and I really enjoyed that and learned a few things. Learned, for example, I liked all the sub-regional groups, but I learned that Awateri, a little bit further south, a little bit closer to the coast, has a kind of zingy acidity, which I always associate with Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc anyway, but especially has a zingy acidity that I like very much. I learned also in white wines, happened to have a number of Rieslings that were all dry, and I love these wines. They had a very Germanic kind of character to me, which you don't always see in New World Riesling. So that was a plus for me. What can I say? I kind of like the Gewürz that I tasted as well. Very much Alsatian flavors, the proper lychee and dried roses and all that stuff, but with a little bit more elegance and grace and zing than you find in Alsace. So that was a big plus for me as well. Then, of course, on to the Pinot Noirs, and tasted 6, liked them all, 3 different vintages, but just reinforced my impression that why are people, if they're talking about Marlborough versus Central Otago, Marlborough needs to be in that discussion as well. And it's still early in my trip. I've been to Marlborough. I'll be spending a couple days in Central Otago, but so far what it looks like to me is that Marlborough is the golden mean. If Marlborough, at its most mediocre, could be a little bit too wiry and tough and aggressive, and if Central Otago, at its most mediocre, can be a little sappy, fruity, but not very deep, it seems to me that every Pinot that I tasted here did not err in one of those directions or the other. They all were a nice blend of structure and fruit, and I don't know, I'm very high on Marlborough Pinot.
Thank you. It's a really lovely endorsement. I think New Zealand's got a lot to offer with Pinot Noir, and yeah, I guess Marlborough's the latecomer, and we're trying to make up for a bit of ground, but strengthen the whole portfolio of New Zealand wines at the same time. Just on food matching, that's another real strength of yours, obviously. What do you see in terms of sort of food style? Say, have you picked Pinot Noir and Sauvignon Blanc maybe as a bit of a tougher one, Sauvignon Blanc? What would you say?
I I don't think there's that much to say, because there are parts of the world where there is a lot to say, because the wines make you say a lot in order to get it right.
Yes.
I think that the wines generally that I taste from Marlborough seem to be very food-friendly wines in general. So I don't think you have to work too hard. I mean, the acid, for me, acid always makes wine good for food. Lack of tannin, lack of high alcohol, those things always make wine good for food. Wood sometimes makes wine tricky for food, and this is not Napa Valley.
No.
I don't have to pick splinters out of my teeth, out of my upper palate when I drink Marlborough wine. So it's got all the elements that make it good for food. Beyond that, I think Pinot Noir from Marlborough is a really excellent across the board kind of red wine. I wouldn't want to tangle with anything that's sweet, not something with a sweet barbecue sauce, no. Not something that's too spicy, not something that's too salty perhaps.
Yeah.
But for your basic roasts and chops and all kinds of things like that, even pasta with the right kind of sauce. I mean, I think this wine goes widely with a lot of things. As for the Sauvignon Blanc, I think it goes widely with a lot of things as well, but that kind of green character that's in most Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, that can be a plus when you start matching it with things that have a little bit of green in them. Anytime vegetables come into the dish, anytime herbs come into the dish, then I think you're really on good and safe ground with Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. But generally, I'm not worried about this region with food.
Great.
There are regions I do worry about. A lot of California I worry about with food, but this region, gonna be fine.
I guess in back home, would some people trying to promote their wines? Do you think there's enough emphasis on food for our wines? Do we need to promote more the versatility of our wines, matching with various food flavours and styles? I don't know if you've been to many of some of the New Zealand tastings overseas, but not sure that happens or not. But
no, they do that. They do focus on that, but at the tasting certainly. But I think in the advertising and the marketing, perhaps it could be more food talk. I'm a little reluctant to give that my full endorsement, because for some reason, there's a certain type of, and I can only speak for the American market, but there's a certain type of wine-loving American who doesn't understand that wine is ultimately for food. I always say that in America, their idea of drinking wine is lining up 20 Chardonnays, giving them all points, and then going out for a Big Mac. It's different in Europe, and I think it's different here. So I think there should, in general, be more focus on wine with food. And I think if and when that happens, I think New Zealand is going to come out on top, because, like many European wines, these are built for food. They've got all the right moves, for food. So I would like to see more of that. But that's not a criticism of New Zealand marketing. It's just a criticism of marketing in general in the U.S. This crazy mania that the more alcoholic and rich and woody the wine is, the better it is. That's now old world, I think. Not Europe old world, but I think that's the last
the last chapter of...
The last chapter.
Yeah.
If I get my way, the next 10 to 20 years will go on to the next chapter.
Good man. Thank you very much for your time. Any further comments or thoughts? Or we're done here? You're going to bask in the sunshine?
Who's ever looking at this and is connected with New Zealand, thank you for having such a wonderful country. We're having a great time here.
Thank you very much. That's very kind.